Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Vegan World 2026 Moonshot podcast. And today we are going to be talking about families making an exponential impact. And we are joined by the Kassam family. I'm going to introduce to you the various members of the Kassam family. There's Laila,
Hi.
Shireen, Zahra, and of course the parents who made this all happen. So, welcome to the podcast and thank you for being here. And thank you for your service to the community, all of you. Um, so, can I begin by asking you, Professor Kassam and Mrs. Kassam, how did you get started in this,
In this meaning what?
in the vegan movement? In the
Oh,
vegan movement, yes.
no. Quite honestly, the credit goes to our daughters.
Okay.
We basically have been following them and all the good reasons, and of course it fits in with our own ethics
Mm.
of life, and these things were missing, and so we very easily were became their full follower. Yes,
Yes, yes.
yes, and of course it's not a one-time thing. They know how difficult it is, and they have helped us along the way. And I must admit, it's taken us maybe more than 7 years to get into this seriously, and so thanks to them. Okay.
Wonderful. So, did you immigrate from India or Pakistan? How did that happen? How did you get into the UK?
My grandparents
Mm.
emigrated from Gujarat. Actually, on
Okay.
my father's side,
Hmm.
his father came from the run of Kutch, the Kutch Bhuj, and
Right.
so we are Kutchi from the father's side. But on my mother's side, my grandfather, maternal grandfather, came from Rajkot. Uh,
Okay.
so so we have both Kutchi and Gujarati linguistic culture, as well as Indian Indian culture, which was modified in East Africa, of course, by the
Mm.
local cultures and environment. And so we're East African Indians who then came to England for education,
Hmm.
and then we settled down here, and our family was the children were born in the UK.
Okay. So you are a world citizen essentially.
well,
Yes.
that's a very nice way of putting it. Yeah, we seem to be global citizens. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
absolutely. How about you, Mrs. Kassam?
My father was from Rajkot again, and he went to East Africa when he was 20. My mother was born in Somalia
Mm.
because my grandfather emigrated from India and settled in Kenya, but he was doing business in Somalia. So my mother was born in Kismayu. I was brought up in East Africa, Tanzania, and I
Mm.
went to school in Tanzania, but came here to the UK to do my further studies.
Wonderful.
And,
So now,
and our roots go into back to Zanzibar. That's where both my grandparents established roots
mm,
in various businesses, especially agricultural businesses, produce merchant, and so forth. So
right.
Zanzibar was where we all started from. Yes,
Zanzibar was the focus of the spice trade, was it not?
very much so. Yes, and the
Mm.
family was deeply involved in spice trade. They were the biggest. Well, on my mother's side, my maternal grandfather was known as the uncrowned prince of a king of cloves.
I see. Okay.
Because he exported so much of cloves in large quantities to basically to Asia, and
Mm.
And guess who was the biggest buyer? I think they're still the biggest buyer now.
Mm.
It is Indonesia, to my
Oh,
great
wow.
surprise, because they love to smoke their tobacco mixed with clove powder.
I see. So
But of
your
course, there are
daughters
many
were,
other uses of cloves. Yeah.
hold on. So your daughters were all born in the UK. So you have three daughters
We have three daughters and a son.
and a son. Okay. I'm sorry I did not invite your son.
I think it will be very difficult to invite him.
Okay.
He's very busy bodybuilding, and I think it would be difficult to convert him.
Either vegetarianism or veganism.
Oh, I see. Okay. So let's begin with you, the daughters, and how did you get involved in this, in the vegan movement? How did it start for you?
Shall I go first? May as well. Well, I've been vegetarian since 2001. I sort of decided I didn't want to be eating animals, but it took rather a long time to make the connection between the dairy and egg industry and the cruelty that it brings upon our fellow kin. And once I had realised, in about 2013, I became vegan. And from there, I started to educate myself on how to adopt a healthy vegan diet, which led me down the path of providing education on the topic here in the UK.
How about the others?
My story is very similar. I've been vegetarian for many years, and it seemed that around 2013 we all were exploring the same things and the same thoughts, and what we were doing as vegetarians didn't fit our ethics, and we became vegan in around 2013, independently but somewhat together. And for me, in my work as a cancer specialist, and similarly to Shireen, diet plays such an important role, and we started to educate ourselves in the health benefits for our patients as well, as the ethical piece, which had come first. And Shireen, she's a constant source of inspiration to me, as is the rest of my family. But Shireen had started Plant-Based Health Professionals UK in 2017, and I flew across for a long weekend for her first conference in March 2018, and it really, I came over to support Shireen because it was such an important event for Shireen, but I hadn't realised what a pivotal event that would be for me. And I thought what Shireen was doing in the UK, educating health professionals and the public, and I took on a similar role in Canada, where we felt there was a gap as well, and co-founded Plant-Based Canada in 2019 with my very good friend Michelle Fideli, who's a plant-based dietitian who works in the same cancer centre as me.
Wonderful. How about you, Laila?
Well, sort of similar to my sisters. I went vegetarian much later than they did in 2010, and it was really because I'd started meditating and I wanted to live mindfully and consciously, and I suddenly started to see what, or rather who, was on my plate. So I went vegetarian, and then, as Zahra said, in 2013, we, I think, had come to the realization that the dairy and egg industry is all part of this toxic system, and we didn't want to be part of it. So I went vegan. And my background is in international development. So I'd spent many years working in the global south and looking at issues around poverty and food security. So basically issues around human oppression. And slowly, I started to make the connections between our oppression of other animals, our oppression of humans, marginalized humans, and our destruction of the natural world. And so I went down a path of really making those connections, and various projects came out of that exploration, including the book that I co-edited with my father, Rethinking Food and Agriculture, and also helping to found Animal Think Tank, which is building a mass movement for animal freedom in the UK.
Yeah, that's it's a wonderful journey, to hear about your transformations happening roughly at the same time. And did that then influence your parents? So when did you both go vegan?
Well, of course, we, or at least I have been in the area of agriculture
Mm-hmm.
practically all my life, and so that world was not unknown to me, and the issues of sustainability
Mm.
were always at the forefront in my mind, and large-scale sustainability, landscape-related sustainability, and also how to understand the potential
Mm.
of our ecologies, and so I started my career as an agroecologist, and with a broad base, but it that I think there were two factors which were important. One is that at the personal level, of course, one could take action, and so, for example, I mean, I stopped eating industrial chicken over 20 years ago, but
Mm.
that is not really enough, and it was only through our daughters that we understood the relationship between food and health, food and environment at the so-called dietary level,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the whole issue, all the whole set of issues around ethics. Now
Mm.
these things are not actually automatically default subjects in agriculture,
Right.
and so the connection was of interest to me as well. But I must admit, I fell ill very badly some 15 years ago, and that took me into the nutritional area.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was not enough, because the medical world is not nutritionally up to date or interested. And they rely on hard drugs and big pharma, and
Right.
what the corporate sector tells them. They basically are very greatly influenced by them. And so when Shireen and others talking to us from the nutritional point of view and health point of view, we started listening, and then about 10 years ago we began to transform. But
Mm.
again, it is that transformation was not really strong, and until we came down around 3 years ago, that we basically took it seriously. But I must admit, without understanding the science behind it and how your body functions, it is not really then easy to finally fully connect and get excited about veganism from a health point of view. And then you realize, of course, all the connection into planetary health,
Right.
and also it did force us to look into review our own ethics. For example,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the killing part, the cruelty part, and then Laila has told us many times that this is all part and parcel of our unknown internalization of the behavior of the colonial behavior, the imperial behavior, and it all is rooted in the way we are cruel to the natural world, and you can see this very, very vividly in the behavior of the corporate world. So that all these things started helping me to connect my world to
Mm.
the greater societal ethics, or what they should be in the future, and then of course more and more about what we can contribute to the future of the world. And then opportunities came along in working together. So
Mm.
Shireen and Laila brought us into the Veg Fest movement, and then
Mm.
I was already negotiating a book, and I so to Laila, would you like to join me? She said, no, not really. No. I mean, you will write the usual book. And she said, no, but if you want me to, then it'll be the book I would like to read. And so I said, please, let's talk about it. So they have now entangled us completely into this new horizon, which is rising above. Well, it's now everywhere, and in fact, we are more excited about it than our daughters are, and because they are at the forefront, right. And we are basically in the crowd behind them, and they see the difficulties and challenge, of course, a lot more than I do. But I do see some of them from the agricultural side. Mm-hmm. And so so it's but Pareen, you must have.
Well, I think my transformation really happened when I read the China study.
Oh wow! Yeah,
and that really made me think. I was always semi-vegetarian anyway. I never liked the meat or chicken or fish anyway. Mm-hmm. The only thing I found difficult was to give up milk and eggs. But once I read the China study, I didn't want to touch milk or eggs.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the data is out there, and now it is putting it together and making sense of it. And so, Laila, I was really fascinated to hear about your journey into understanding the social justice aspects of it. And so, how far have you unraveled the Gordian knot on that issue?
I think it's never ending, to be honest.
I know.
The more I read and learn, the more I realize I don't know and how conditioned we are. But there's been some key books on my journey, I suppose. I think the first one was The World Peace Diet by Will Tuttle, that really brought together a lot of these connections, including around spirituality. And then An Unnatural Order by Jim Mason, and he looks at what happened 10,000 years ago when we started domesticating other animals, and how that's led to war and colonization and social stratification and expansionary herding cultures, and how that is so much at the basis of our agrarian Western culture now. So and David Neibert's book, Animal Rights, Human Rights, Entanglements of Liberation, of Oppression and Liberation. And I think that title says so much. Our oppressions are entangled, and so our liberation is also entangled. And so I think the journey for me is ongoing. And at the same time, I sort of feel like we have to, I don't know, I think that context has to be in our minds, and we also have to be able to, I mean, it feels really overwhelming. I think that's what I'm trying to say. And so I think we have to pick, Sailesh, you've picked all of it, but I, in my journey, have had to pick really the animal liberation piece with that context of entangled oppressions in the back of, as the wider context. But I'm currently working very hard to build a mass movement for animal freedom in the UK and change the legal status of animals here.
Well, you're working at the roots of all social oppressions, actually. So thank you for your efforts. Shireen, on the health side, tell us about plant-based telehealth and what has it accomplished?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, there's two organisations that sort of came back to back. The first one is Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, which is an education and advocacy organisation educating, health professionals and the public about the benefits of a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet. And we're a membership organisation, but most of our offering are free with webinars and fact sheets and those sort of things. And, providing advocacy, so supporting people that are having difficulties and challenges with the diet choices they're making. And that sort of then naturally led to forming a sister organisation with my colleague and friend, Dr. Laura Freeman, who's a GP and lifestyle medicine physician, and that's called Plant-Based Health Online. Because the most common question I was getting through the education platform was, where can I find a plant-based doctor, dietitian, obstetrician, where can I find a doctor that understands my health challenges in the context of a vegan or a plant-based diet. And so that's what we've sort of launched this year. It's the only accredited lifestyle medicine service here in the UK that also uses a plant-based approach to preventing and reversing chronic disease and helping people achieve their best health by minimizing sort of conventional pharmaceutical medications, but bringing lifestyle interventions to the forefront. Because, I mean, it's very sad to say, but it took me 13 years of a practicing doctor to realize that the bulk of what we're seeing in the National Health Service in the UK, probably 80% of chronic illness and premature deaths, could be wiped out if we all adopted healthy lifestyle habits, and that includes a plant-based diet. So hopefully now people can see a regulated health professional who can provide them with that advice and mentoring to change their lifestyle to achieve their better health.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's something that Gandhi wrote about in 1909. That this is how Western civilization works, he said. It doesn't really address the root cause of problems, but just tries to make money off the symptoms. And so he identified that as a fundamental issue with the way Western civilization operates. And he was recommending in his book that we adopt the Indian way of doing things, which is to address the root cause of problems. And so it's just now coming to a synthesis of the two. You really need to take both and put it together, and which is what you're trying to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tell us about the course you're offering. You're offering a course through a university, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So I also work part-time at Winchester University here in the UK. And I was lucky enough at the time that I approached them that their Vice-Chancellor, Professor Joy Carter, was vegan herself, very much passionate about promoting sustainability and social justice. And in fact, those are the core values of the university. And, I proposed that, well, if you really wanted to make a difference, we needed to be offering a course that no one else was offering in the UK. And she took up the challenge. And so I've been able to offer the only accredited course in the UK for healthcare professionals online, so globally accessible. And it's been hugely popular, which is a nice surprise to myself and the university. That's made a nice bit of money, but more importantly, it just shows that there really is an appetite for learning amongst health professionals. And as time's gone on, it's noticeable that it's not just vegans that are signing up for the course. It's people who are on various different diet patterns, wanting to learn about plant-based diet, and during the course making changes to their own diet, and then hopefully having knock-on effects for their own patients. So yeah, we run an 8-week course back to back throughout the academic year, and it's open to everyone, but aimed at practicing clinical health professionals.
Does it also have people supervising your progress? And is it like a full-fledged course?
Yeah, so it's facilitated. So myself and my colleague, Dr. Laila Kassam, are there to answer questions and queries and, respond to assignments and that sort of thing. Yeah, but in the kind of virtual online space.
Wonderful. So coming to Zahra and the work that you're doing in Canada, please tell us about that.
Thank you. So when I came across to see Shireen's conference, at her first conference, we spoke, and similarly to the UK at that time, Canada didn't have a very strong voice in healthcare in plant-based nutrition. And so Shireen and I decided to put on a conference in Canada in 2019, really to test the water and see what the uptake would be. And that conference did really well. It was sold out. We had a long waiting list. And by doing that, we came across, a small but growing group of very interested and passionate healthcare professionals who were plant-based and also who were practicing lifestyle medicine. And in parallel, this lifestyle medicine group was also advocating, and similarly to our work, and I've been very lucky to be on the working group of the lifestyle medicine group as well. We've just become a member interest group of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which of course is the flagship organization for lifestyle medicine globally. And so we made so many contacts and with wonderful, amazing people doing the same work. So, you know, based on that, Michelle and I co-founded Plant-Based Canada so that we could continue our work, our goal of educating the public and healthcare professionals in Canada on the evidence-based benefits of plant-based nutrition for health, for the planet, and also for the benefit of all its life forms. And we use Plant-Based Canada to have a yearly conference in plant-based nutrition for Canadians, specifically highlighting Canadian expertise, because that's sort of left out. There's a lot of US expertise, and we all fly to the US to get the up-to-date evidence on plant-based nutrition, but we have such great Canadians doing the same thing. So we have that conference, we have a Plant-Based Canada podcast, which we have new podcasts every 2 weeks, and that's fantastic. And we use our social media platforms to provide education on all the aspects, all the benefits of plant-based nutrition. Sailesh, you're still muted.
The pioneering aspect of what Canada has been doing is the Canadian Food Guide. It's probably the first food guide that eliminated dairy as a food group. So I'm so grateful for Canada for doing that, you know, because it shines a light on this colonial aspect of this animal food consumption. And I see that Canada is a pioneer, primarily maybe because Canada also has to deal with the healthcare costs directly. So what do you think about that thesis? Is that why it happened?
I think it happened because of key individuals in the group that was working on this, and they very deliberately excluded any lobbyists from the meat and dairy industry. And so they were able to produce a document which, as you say, is amazing. I think it's the best food guide internationally out of all the countries that was truly evidence-based. And of course, there were so many attempts to discredit it by the meat and dairy industry at the time. And, you know, it's fascinating to watch all that, but they stood firm. And so for now, we have a fabulous food guide. And as you say, it removed dairy as an essential food group. It definitely promotes plant-based eating. And if you add up their plate, it's at least 87.5% made up of plants for their nutritional plate. So that it's great.
Yeah, wonderful. I expect the UK will be next because UK also has a National Health Service.
It does. I'm not quite so optimistic. We've just had the National Food Strategy review and a plan put forward to the government by the group that was given the challenge to come up with a working food strategy that really, for the first time, brought together the food production side with the health outcomes. And, it does clearly lay out that we need to reduce meat consumption by 30%. We need to increase fruits and vegetable consumption by 30% and fiber consumption by 50%, while, minimizing ultra-processed food consumption. But, we've known this for such a long time, and, they're very moderate recommendations given the picture that was painted in the main text about the dire situation of the climate and the biodiversity of our surroundings. So, and whether the government will take it up, I don't know. But we do have a very nice food guide. It's very adaptable and takes into account, dairy alternatives. 2/3 of the plate is plant-based. But, as with all food guides, nobody's following it. So it's all about the implementation piece and, having a public health system that makes sure that these foods are accessible and the education is culturally adaptable and appropriate.
Does the food guide influence the kind of food that's served in schools?
I mean, it's obviously meant to. I mean, that's meant to be the working guide, but it's not infrequent to see processed meat and pizzas and chips and those things on school menus. And there's a number of groups working to change the school food environment, as I'm trying to change the hospital food environment. And it also comes, you can make healthy choices within these environments, but it comes down to people's preferences, which really have many different factors leading to people's choice and what they think that they want to eat, and things that are familiar to them from their sort of home environment as well. So I think it's a difficult bit of work to unpick.
Yeah, which brings me to the work that Laila has been doing, where you point out that the choices come with costs, right? There are costs to the animals, to the costs to people who are oppressed. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, making those connections between, what we're eating, who we're eating, and how they got to our plate, is, especially in this corporate food regime that we are operating in, we are so disconnected from our choices and the consequences of our choices because of globalization, the corporate food regime, which is based on exploitation and extraction and a capitalist system that is basically, fueled by an ideology of growth at all costs. It's kind of like grow or go bust, and it's based on, extracting labor and value from the planet, from humans, from other animals, all of whom are seen as resources. So actually, all of these oppressions are so exacerbated and fueled by this ideology and mentality of extraction and exploitation. And we as consumers, we're so disconnected from it.
Yeah, it is growth at all costs because they're running an ecological Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
It's and if any Ponzi scheme will collapse if it doesn't grow.
Yeah.
Right. So we've been working on an alternative way of organizing currency systems so that you don't have to have a Ponzi scheme. And this utterly heartless system that says if you had bad luck and you lost out on the Ponzi scheme, you're going to have to starve to death.
Yeah.
That's the way it is set up right now. But Dr. Kassam, I guess when I say Dr. Kassam, all four of you are going to rise up. Sorry. Yeah. So your work on conservation agriculture that you've been working on for, I don't know, a few decades now, right? This is your life's work. How has that been received in the corporate world?
That's a very good question, which forces me to say that some of the things which is happening in the medical world or in the environmental management have also been happening in the agricultural world, where the narrative is developed not really for sustainability, and it's as Laila was saying, it's infinite growth, extractive and all that. But I think one could argue that we might want growth. The point is that it's growth out of control, so to speak, and it doesn't serve the purpose for the planet or the global society. And questions in my mind were arising even when I was at the university and then working abroad in India, in Africa. Why we were doing or forced to do some of the research the way we were doing. And for example, in Nigeria, where Zahra was a little baby there, we were doing research, and I asked the director, we need really two types of research. One is which is applicable to the people we are claiming to serve, the small farmers, poor farmers, and then this other agenda which we seem to have, which is asking everybody to sort of take on a totally different way of farming and through a linear extension approach. I saw the same thing in India, where we lived, and I worked for an international research organization. Again, the same thing. It is not just growth, because we wanted growth in terms of yield, but it carries with it this enormous sort of growth on the input side, which are basically corporate driven. And so what we have been looking at and absorbing without questioning is a agriculture which is totally chemicalized, and the story started long before we were born, all of us. So we had internalized the story in a intergenerational manner, and so nobody was questioning, and so it's not easy to challenge. So finally, when I got involved in some big land use studies, and studies which define the potential of land at the national level, right down to the farm level, then I realized the degradation which the agricultural land use were causing, and this was totally kept hidden, and I mean totally kept hidden. And even in the vegan movement or in the animal rebellion movement, they have picked up on the degradation, but not fully. That we have been degrading this world's natural resources at a phenomenal rate for many centuries. But in the last 100 years, we have basically destroyed 500 million hectares of land, and are continuing to do that with the industrial driven food system, which they want to make maximum profit right along all parts of the value chain, and want to transfer the cost, environmental cost, the cost of destroying land, destroying biodiversity, destroying our water system, you can't pass that on to anybody, even into future generation, because it's happening right now. And so about 30 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, I got interested in systems development, that we were basically entangled in this reductive thinking, and which of course Laila soon experienced when she was doing her degree, but reductive scientific thinking, which never really forces you to understand what is the system we're trying to improve or manage or even facilitate. And that then took me into this business of degradation. And we, in 1970, or late 70, early 80, when we were listening to Limits to Growth and all that, the Rome group, I was working with FAO, deeply involved in quantifying agroecological potentials of our land, and then human carrying capacity. And we saw that we had enormous potential. But if we continued the way we were doing, and of course, even then, my knowledge about sustainable land use was limited. I took on the dominant paradigm available at that time, which was input, output, simple input, output. If you want more output, put more input. And I basically developed a growth model based on that. But then I also brought in this business of degradation, that if we continued along that line, we will lose 25% of our potential over the next 25 years. Now that really is a big consequence, and it was kept hidden, and this is late 70s, early 80s, and it was still kept hidden. By the end of the century, we were still avoiding the question of loss of biodiversity, loss of land resources, erosion, water pollution, and it really came to a head when climate change began to be felt everywhere. And then we realized, gosh, it's not just the climate breakdown and degradation, but we are degrading everything around it, and they are all interconnected.
Right.
And so I then basically, I just happened to be at that time working for the CGIAR Science Council as a natural resource management expert. And I soon realized that they really weren't interested in this degradation effect. They were interested in continuing the model which Laila described, and basically trying to show that we are efficient at doing research. So it was research efficiency, and so they can reduce their cost of doing research, but not really looking at the outcome, but still selling as many inputs, and then all that nonsense about credit and so forth. So I basically started promoting this whole idea of systems development, and it is then that I basically developed an interest among several systems in conservation agriculture. And by that time, it had lots and lots of empirical evidence available. A lot of champions were working abroad. They were not in the research system. They were in their national research system, but more in the development area. And same thing with rice. We came across the system of rice intensification, and there were other things to do with comprehensive valley development, comprehensive management of our germplasm. Now, all these are systems, but essentially, when it comes to agriculture production, then that's where I became deeply interested in conservation agriculture, which is a no-till system as close to nature as possible, because in nature there is no tillage.
Right.
In nature works through biodiversity, and nature basically recycles things. It does not try and produce waste. It is waste might be intermediate thing, but they are part of cycle. And that's when I really began to get interested in how agriculture can be working in a similar way. And of course, the conservation agriculture was a classic example, which still now there's now so much science-based information, and it is expanding at a rate of 10 million hectares per year. But your question is, how is that accepted by the corporate sector? No, because it reduces the cost of production. It can be done without any inputs as well, if you really understand the science behind it, like Fukuoka showed in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s when he wrote his book One Straw Revolution. And then there were many others who have been challenging the culture of plowing. Plowing a soil is like causing an earthquake with 8 at the 8th Richter scale damage, and so you destroy the soil, and then you also destroy all the biodiversity in the soil as well. Those are like our gut biome. Shireen will tell you all about the gut biome, but the agricultural biomes live in the soil, and we destroy them. So they have co-opted conservation agriculture, but they've not really bought into it. Same thing with the research system. The international research system, which is also corporate driven, more and more, have not bought into this. And then, of course, our international development organization, who basically are corporate driven, whether you like it or not. And if they are not corporate driven explicitly, they are imperialistically driven. And this is and so they want to maintain control, and control is that you can't do your work without us. You can't
Right.
lead your life without us. And
Right.
so they basically have got their paradigm, which now, and in fact, has been challenged for last 30 years explicitly in the field of agriculture. Like people like Altieri, and they said that
Mm.
your paradigm is wrong. We need agroecology, and
Mhm.
they have then integrated the challenge to the corporate sector in the definition of agroecology. But conservation agriculture, because it is practicable for every farmer, small, rich, women farmer, male farmer. We try and say, look, establish conservation agriculture and then overlay other things which you need to do. But this one will give you your factory on the farm a
Mm.
real boost, and you will be able to manage it without being dependent on outside input or credit, or
Right.
you will become prolific, and you can move from there. And then of course you go into the value chain at both ends. You need your equipment, your inputs as well, but different kinds and different amount. And then you need to then get into education, research, and the private sector, and that's what we have been doing. And 15 years ago or so, we established a plan of action for conservation agriculture, and I'm the moderator of the global
Mm.
platform for conservation agriculture community of practice, and we work in a institutional mode, but completely in an informal way. And Laila has been trying to tell me, Amir, this is the way forward, because we have we can develop movements and participants in that movement who do not need to be beaten down with recipes and instructions and
Right.
prescription. They know what the right thing to do is once they've understood the root principles of what we are working towards. Then they run together, and it's therefore the herd is together. The herd keeps together, and it gathers force all the time, and they don't run into each other, and there are no conflicts. And so we basically are working at the farmers level,
Mm.
farmers association, and basically pointing out all the destructive forces in the dominant paradigm, but also bringing forward more and more scientific evidence, and then also reminding people that even in India, I mean, the
Mm.
dairy industry has destroyed the total population of vultures, for example.
Right.
It's killed off because then in India they don't want to hear anything against dairy, and so but so it's being modernized, and it is going down the same route as the dairy industry in the Western world, trying to produce an animal with 10-gallon udder, which is totally uh, unethical,
Mm.
to change the form of a cow so that it can give you unlimited sort of milk, but
Mhm.
it's filled with chemicals and toxins and antibiotics, or what do you call it, whatever. So I think that we have a lot to be challenged against by those who have this dominant paradigm of control,
Mhm.
of expensive inputs, and also they are controlling the food part as well, the food value chain, which they have controlled, and basically have disconnected it from human health and the environment. And so I think in at least in working with Laila, Shireen, and Zahra, they keep using the phrase, oh, we are able to connect the dots, but
Mm.
there are many other dots as well. But we've been able to try and connect the dots, and that was the basis for the book. But they are out there challenging the world in a much more active way. But
Mm.
we are now doing it in a similarly active way. But we are working with the farmers, and as long as the farmers are changing without the help of research, without the help of institutions, then we have allowed then we have a movement which has its own evidence. And so look, if these farmers are doing it without you, better ask questions. What are you existing for? You know, and so something which Shireen has been highlighting as well. And but I think that many, also some in the private sector, are listening. So we are now able to highlight new equipment. Even in India, for example, the Happy Seeder is a direct drill for planting. You know, of course, the original prototype came from Australia, but you have the Indian version. Pakistan produced a turbo Happy Seeder, and now we've got a Lucky Seeder for direct drilling of rice. You know, and all these things show that farmers can do it, but they need support, they need training, and they need time and to be appreciated in terms of that they are enhancing the environment, restoring the environment, and we can because how else are you going to restore this massive degradation we have created in this world? And so my wife is always pointing to me that I should shut up. So I will now. You know, she yeah. My daughters also feel I talk too much, but anyhow, I'm very passionate about what I do.
I can see that. I can see that. Yeah, so, you're absolutely right. You know, it has all been about mining the soil and extracting as much as you can as quickly as possible, so that we can run away with the loot.
Well, but then dumping.
Right.
Well, Sailesh, you know that we have exceeded several planetary boundaries.
Right.
Who is responsible for exceeding the phosphorus boundary? Who is responsible for saturating this world with nitrogen?
Right.
I mean, you ask her, who is responsible for polluting our water system? I mean, it's just, if it's not our modern industrial methods, then I'm really, you know, I mean, I give up. So, but they just can't listen to it. They just want you to buy more and more. But we will reach a point where finally the younger generations will basically bring forward the change, and I think it is beginning to happen. Not in governments or in these big institutions. It is happening where it really matters, and I think that will then basically create a front where hopefully, because the younger generation will eventually end up in become MPs in the future, become future professors. And I mean, I used to teach a full semester course, which Laila took. Because you know, to me, my course was an eye opener to the students. But eventually, the department didn't really like it, because I was showing all the big holes in their thinking. And as you know, most universities get their funding from the private sector, and so they're not going to really do serious agroecological research. They will only do that if it is good for business, and I think they now know that we know it, and they're going to be criticized more and more for it.
But as you said, the younger generation is already making the changes.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Laila, would you like to take that further?
Well, because the younger generation, well, I certainly am not part of the younger generation that's leading the charge. I think I'm a bit past it. But I wanted to say one thing, just to add on to what my father was saying, and just to clarify that conservation agriculture is by default vegan. It doesn't use any animal input. So for us, I think it's a really, really important paradigm, and an alternative to, you know, the industrial and also to the traditional organic agriculture that uses animal inputs. But regarding, you know, the changes that need to come about and that are starting to come about, 100% agree. It's social movements that is going to do this. It's social movements that is going to shift public opinion, which ultimately will shift power holders. And as you often say, Sailesh, we don't we don't need governments necessarily. We can be building alternatives within the structures of the old crumbling paradigm as well. And one of the conceptual frameworks that Animal Think Tank is really persuaded by around social movements and successful social justice movements that have happened in the past is that there are all these different pieces that need to come together and work in synergy. So the individual change and the individual transformation, so veganism, building alternatives, so the alternative currencies, sanctuaries, co-housing, so many different alternative ways of living and being and seeing the world. And then there's challenging the dominant institutions that shape society from inside the system, lobbying, party politics, etc., and from outside the system through community organizing and through mass protest movements. And when we look at the movement cycle of social justice movements that have been successful, it is the mass protest piece that has really catalyzed and opened up this ecology of social movements, and has pushed these issues that we're working for out into the public consciousness, and is forcing people to actually take part in the debate and look at the issues and to take a side and to pick a side through things like, direct action, which polarizes, but which is, part of the dynamic of conflict, which then, opens up debate and shifts the Overton window and shifts what society thinks is possible. So I think for me anyway, social movements is where I want to put my energy, because I think that is what really sort of, I think, leads in terms of transformative change, because we don't really want incremental change. It's too late. We want to transform society and the world and our paradigms and all of it, and transform consciousness. And as far as I can see, it is social movements working in concert with all these different elements, and together, I think they can, working synergistically together, so much creativity can emerge. So yeah.
That's wonderful. And helping individuals make that transition happen. That's what you do, right? Both Shireen and Zahra. Thank you so much. We are almost towards the end of our time. So if you'd like to wrap up and tell us anything that I didn't ask you, if you'd like to add, please continue.
Well, I'll just say that a lot of what we offer is freely available resources for, public, for health professionals. Just take a look at the website, the resources, and start using it, because, as you say, the change is happening because doctors are fed up of not being able to change the health outcomes for their patients. Patients are fed up of being sick and not knowing how to change. And I think that's what's going to drive the shift in the medical movement as doctors start practicing in a different way. And we're just trying to help them, move that forward quicker by providing the resources and things for them to do it without having to go to the source data themselves.
Thank you. Any last words, Zahra?
No, well said. I've really enjoyed this podcast, listening to all my family. It's wonderful. And thank you, Sailesh. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for inviting us.
Laila?
Yes, I have something I want to say. I'm feeling really moved to say that everything that we're all doing is about taking our power back. What my sisters are doing is taking the power to actually transform our own individual health back from doctors, big pharma, hospitals, etc., and actually take that power to transform our own bodies and our own health and our own lives. And what my father has been doing is transforming the potential for farmers to take back their own sovereignty and their own power to be self-sufficient and to live off their land. What I'm trying to do with building or part of a group that's trying to build a social movement is to remind people that society has conditioned us to give our power away, and we need to take it back if we are going to survive what is coming.
That's so beautifully put. Thank you, Laila. So, any last words, Professor Kassam?
No, I really just want to thank you for having us and patiently listening to us. We would love to have a podcast trying to find out what you do. But anyway, we know you are part of the community where we want to belong to. And thank you so much. It's a privilege and an honor for both me and my wife to be together with our children and to be talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's my privilege to host all of you.